So today I want to connect to some of the design and construction deliverables to facility management operations and how they inform the digital thread. Okay, so you can see a bit of my background on the screen there. A fun fact, during my career, over about 35 years, I guess now, I totaled up all the moves, and I've moved over 77,000 kilometers and worked on a lot of buildings. And if you're wondering, yes, my wife is still with me, even though we have done all that moving. I've been in 4 countries. One country I really enjoyed was working in India. I learned a lot of things there. One of the things that I learned was the West ways aren't always the best ways. And I was humbled one day in my role as the chief facilities officer for this new city that was being built. I had this cabin, or they call it cabin attendant, and he basically would just, whatever was needed, he would go get that. And at the end of each day, he would ask me if he could carry my briefcase down to the car. And I thought that was kind of demeaning. And so every day he'd ask me, and every day I'd say, no, thank you. And he'd ride down the elevator with me, take me to my car, and smile as he closed the door. And this went on for weeks. And then finally one day I thought, well, I got to get over myself, so I gave him my briefcase, and he had the biggest smile on his face. And his chest was, he was just so proud of doing that. And I thought, man, he taught me what servanthood looked like, and I was really appreciative of that. There's been a few bumpy spots along the road. Like any road, that's bound to happen. But I still think that facility management is the best profession on this planet. One day it's going to be the best profession on other planets. One of the things I want to say to Aman, he asked a really good question online. And so what I would just say to you, Aman, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll connect with you, and I'll try to help you with your question. Okay, so this house on the right, I think this Hobbit house, represents our comfort zone. It's a place of comfort, a place where we be, regardless of our profession. It may feel like after years that we start to see around the corners. But as we can see in this illustration, this digital tsunami is quickly becoming very real and bearing down on all of us. But here we are today. And we're attending this fantastic virtual delivery conference. That's exciting and commendable. One of my mentors, he was in his 80s at the time, and he said to me one morning, he said, John, always stay fat. And I thought, oh my goodness, he's starting to lose it. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he says, well, stay faithful, available, and teachable. And so I think all of us, we're available here. We could be doing 100 different things, but we took the time to be here. And so we're here, and hopefully, I know I'm learning some things this morning from the great panelists and presentations that went on. So let's jump into it. Okay, definition always provides a context. The Building Transformation Digitization Data Glossary, which is online, defines the digital thread as a framework that connects engineering teams and their data, allowing an integrated view of the asset throughout its life cycle, and it allows multiple views to be created for various stakeholders. And like I said, I would encourage you to go check that out. If there's definitions that you don't have on that are there that you think that should be there, there's a place for you to go ahead and update that, make a suggestion. This presentation is from, as Tom said, from an FM perspective. So IFMA is the world's largest facility management association. Started in 1980. It represents it's over 100 nations right now. Membership is north of 24,000. IFMA, it defines FM as a profession that encompasses multiple disciplines to ensure functionality, comfort, safety, and efficiency of the built environment by integrating people, place, process, and technology. And so when it says place, and one of the definitions called it properties, or another would be referred to as assets. So it's people, assets, process, and technology. And FM is a profession. I asked somebody today, do they know what FM is? And they said, I have no idea. And I thought, well, that's great. So hopefully that's one thing that they will learn from this presentation. So FM is a profession that can include maintenance, engineering, custodial, groundskeeping, security, parking, food service, laundry services, energy management, capital renewal. FM can also include design and construction. But what FM includes or does not include is not as crucial as what FM integrates, and that is people, assets, process, and technology in a sustainable manner. It's essential to remember why we do what we do. When we lose our purpose, we often lose our way. There's some really fun photos there. We design, build, and maintain facilities for people to learn, live, worship, heal, eat at, have fun in, explore, and many other space programming possibilities. But how we design, build, and maintain, and I will add finance, those spaces will directly impact our customers in those spaces. Facilities that do not have adequate capital renewal funds, as one example, will impact those customers sooner or later. As a result, they may not choose to return as a customer, and worse yet, crank up the social media machine, adversely affecting your brand. No customers, no jobs. Let us collectively keep our customers in mind. Someone once said that the first thing the leader must do is define the present reality. So what's happening right now in our world? What is our present reality? We see shrinking energy supply, rising energy costs, growing supply chain issues, pandemics, shrinking labor pools, the Great Resignation. The United States, as an example, has a workforce of 160 million, and there are 4 million people quitting their job every month. And that trend is actually starting to migrate to other countries. There's a lot of text on this slide. I want to apologize for that. So some specifics. In BC, I was reading recently that the construction industry is projecting a 64,000 trade shortfall in the next 10 years. The World Economic Forum reports that buildings consume 40% of global energy, 25% of global water, and emit 1/3 of greenhouse gases, the buildings that we design, build, and operate. And unlike the occupants of that hobbit home, conferences like this, where we exchange perspectives, enable us to venture out and determine how these external factors will affect us all, and maybe future generations. So what we do now, what we need to do now is tackle and mitigate these global and regional issues. How can data help us know where we are, and using AI help us project where we will be? One of the concepts is the total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership tells us that there's two primary buckets for costs. One is the initial design and construction. The other bucket is the operation and maintenance costs over the lifetime of that building. So whether it's 55 years, 70 years, 80 years, you can pick a number. If you want to pick some of the buildings in Europe, some have been around for hundreds, if not much, much longer. The key point here is that 15 to 20% of construction, I've actually there's a spreadsheet, and if you're interested in that spreadsheet, I can send it to you. And you can plug in what your construction rate is, what your O&M costs are, what your capital renewal percentage would be for future years, and you can test this percentage. But it's astounding how much is actually allocated towards the operations and maintenance, and this is really rarely talked about. Always we talk about how much a new building is going to cost, but rarely the long-term cost. So in this reality of reduced availability of skilled labor and rising energy costs, if the facilities were designed and constructed in such a way to proactively address these matters, wouldn't it be a better place to land? The second concept is this life cycle analysis. So in this example that I've got here, you'll see two scenarios. So one pump costs $5,000, will last for 5 years. The second pump costs $10,000 and will last twice as long at 10 years. So which would you spec and install? So I want you to think more than the obvious. So I want you to think about the time to source that second pump, the cost to procure that second pump, the cost to remove that first pump, the cost to dispose that first pump, the cost to install the second pump, the cost to update the documentation, asset registry, drawings, CMMS, etc., the energy to manufacture that second pump, the energy consumed to ship that second pump, the energy consumed to dispose of this first pump, metals mined and transported to manufacture that second pump, and then there's the greenhouse gas effect. I'm sure you can think of a few other examples for indirect costs. So it's much, much more than just that initial purchase price or the life cycle, although we do need to look at that. Okay, so now what's required to help us identify the digital threat in FM operations? One of the things that I've been really leaning into lately is this building charter. And I won't read the things that I think that should be included in a building charter, but as the owner of FM, to determine actually what should future buildings look like, what should be contained within those buildings, how should they operate. And what can often happen is an absence of a vision, anything will do. And so what happens, it can become a commodity, or it's a dive towards the bottom. Let's produce this building or this space at the lowest cost possible without thinking about the ripple effect to the labor or energy cost down the road. The commissioning process ensures that what the owner has paid for was designed and constructed. This topic can be a session all on its own, but suffice it to say the data from the commissioning process is crucial to the long-term operating success. This is a picture of a facility manager looking at a building with all of the data embedded into its assets, processes, documentation, and technology. Where are all of those single sources of truth? Quite frankly, owners in the FM profession seem to be lagging behind the architects and constructors in terms of digitization. I almost see an ad every week in LinkedIn. Somebody's looking for a virtual design coordinator. Unfortunately, I've never seen a similar position for the FM profession. A new contract scope is critical for FM operations from a digital thread perspective. In addition to the points highlighted on the screen, you should double check the delivery of those scoped items. There's probably more, obviously, for the FM that are watching. As an FM, you should be aware that everyone makes mistakes. We heard 3%. I think Geraldine shared that number. I'd never heard that before. That's interesting. So it always happens. So just to reconcile what actually is in the scope and actually what was delivered, we need to take the long view. The next one is the asset registry. We've talked about this a few times today. To me, it contains all sorts of juicy data points. This is, you can see about 10 items that are listed here. In my asset registry, I have over 30 columns in it. And typically, I'm looking for things like geography, asset information, key dates, special instructions like card access or confined space. I get into that parent-child relationship on those assets sheets as well. So once it's done, it takes a lot of effort to keep it current. And so don't, just like in a construction project where things can creep, the same thing can happen with this particular initiative. So just stay on top of it and keep it accurate. We all know the pain of rework, of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Imagine how many times over the life cycle of a building, in the absence of as-built CAD drawings, that space has been measured and remeasured and remeasured and remeasured, and then manually drawn again and again and again. So rather than starting that way, let's start with an as-built drawing and then update that as-built drawing with each subsequent space alteration. Another data set that often overlooked is the warranty. Not having this can add unnecessary cost to an organization. A few things to capture for your assets are, what's the start date of your warranty, how many years are on the warranty, what's included in the warranty, most important, inspect the asset before the warranty concludes. It's surprising in my career how many times that actually the asset had failed before the end of the warranty, but the maintenance team didn't realize that it had failed until after that period of time. So just set that up as a rigor. Construction change order log important. Why is this important from a data thread perspective? Well, first, it may it may change that previously laid out data in the project scope and then the other documentation. It's one of the things I feel that in our profession we're not spending enough time on, and it has an enormous impact downstream. Closeout submittals is another source of data. The better projects will have a very prescriptive closeout submittal deliverable. Take the time to review those and export those deliverables into an Excel checklist. Many of the deliverables in those documents will be, some of them are actually listed on the slide here. So you're going to have deliverables, a document deliverable, but sometimes you're going to have procedural deliverables, such as a defect management plan. Again, there's much to mine during this vital project phase. As a facility management consultant, I also know that I'm supposed to generate FM content. And this week I learned, I find it very tedious and time-consuming, although I know it's important, maybe because I only use 4 fingers. But the other day I learned that there's a company called Jaspers. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's an AI platform, and basically you type in a few points and it fills in the content. I haven't tested it, but I love that idea. So to be curious about what's happening around us, and I saw that and I wondered, you think about how many tasks we do in the design, build, and operate, and it's immense documentation. And which version do you have? How complete it is it current? But to have some sort of AI that would mine all of that and do those checks. So if somebody has that technology, I'd like to hear about it. Yeah. It might surprise you that for technology, this is the only slide that I have. And because it might surprise you because I said there's 4 elements of facility management: people, process, assets, and technology. But technology is an essential part of FM. But the business strategies, workflows, and requirements must be first clearly understood. The amount of failed tech sourcing and implementation is far too high. And while controlled failures are okay, failures of this type of nature do not garner trust within organizations or leadership, nor do they bode well for our possession. So, as somebody once said, choose wisely. Before we can have a digital twin, we must be fully informed, have a fully informed data-associated physical twin. And by this, I mean that we need to have the data from the asset registry, locations on the drawings, CX reports, tab reports, supplier contact information, energy information, inspection results, and a plethora of other things. When I worked in India 15 years ago, I met this brilliant, humble man that had developed an algorithm to measure pump efficiency. And at that time, about that same time, we were doing a day like this in Washington, D.C., and we were focusing on the best tech that was available at that time. And he was talking algorithms when we weren't really talking algorithms here. And somebody had said, you know, there's this guy, John Ringness, living in Mumbai, you really should meet. So I met him, and he shared what he was doing. And I said, so what are you doing with this pump efficiency algorithms? And he said, I'm using it to measure the water efficiency for the crops, food supply. And I said, well, why wouldn't you use it in buildings? I mean, buildings, they consume 40% of the global energy. And he says, well, quite frankly, I never thought about it. And it became this good friendship. And basically, he helped me understand that an asset is so much greater than actually what we see it initially to be. And so find people like that you can have those stimulating conversations as we try to change their trajectory towards the future. This slide here, from connected assets to connected cities, the latest edition of Harvard Business Review, there was several nuggets in it. So if you read that or haven't read it for this month, I'd encourage you to pick it up because there are some articles in there about data. But there was an ad in there from SAS, and they had this tagline that says, the answers we need are everywhere. Just ask the data. And I thought, man, that's really good. So data, I think we're all here, we understand the importance of it. But digital transformation requires that executives, managers, and frontline employees work together to rethink how every aspect of the built environment should operate. Remember that earlier slide and it was the World Economic Forum that published that 40% of the global energy is attributed to buildings, 25% of global water, and 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions. So what would happen if each building had a real-time dashboard in the main floor lobby, depicting energy and water consumption in real time? We could benchmark building performance from design parameters to actual annual performance levels year over year, and we could learn from each other. Like when we buy a food product, it'll tell us what's inside that food. It used to be this way when you bought something that you could tell which country of origin that good was manufactured. That thing seems to be slipping away. But the buildings represent so much of what's critical to our future. And so I think that type of visibility would be very helpful. This slide is just an unabashed plug for the Building Transformation and Digitization think tank. In fact, 5 of us are at this conference today. And I got to say, it's so encouraging to see this younger generation stepping in. And Aaron, Megan, and Chris, you guys are rock stars, and I'm humbled to learn from you. And Rick, as a CEO, you're very busy. You've got tons of things going on, so thank you for investing your time in that think tank. If anybody wants to join our think tank, we have other task groups that will be forming, and would encourage you to check us out. In closing, we are all doing what we do to create meaningful spaces for our customers. Today, we shared ways to identify the data we should gather, monitor, and improve upon while informing our digital thread from an FM perspective. Many digital threads make up the digital rope. So let's pull on that rope together. The same direction. And those that follow us will be grateful. So thank you for your time, and that's it.